Most folks in Oakmont, Ohio, thought Sam Crawford was just another struggling single father and mechanic, working 16-hour days to keep his garage afloat and put food on the table for his 12-year-old daughter, Chloe. What they didn't know was that beneath those grease-stained coveralls lived a mechanical genius who once designed engines for professional racing teams. When wealthy racing enthusiast Vincent Stone walked into Crawford's auto repair that July morning and made what seemed like an impossible bet: transform a worthless junkyard car into a competitive racer in 30 days for $10,000. Sam should have walked away. Instead, he accepted a challenge that would reveal hidden talents, uncover long-buried secrets, and show an entire community that sometimes the most extraordinary miracles come from the most unlikely places. This is the story of how a pile of scrap metal became a racing legend, and how one man's desperate gamble shocked everyone at Oakwood Racing Circuit in ways nobody saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across Sycamore Lane as Sam Crawford wiped the sweat from his brow with a grease-stained rag. The July heat was already building, promising another scorching day in Oakmont. His small auto repair shop stood wedged between Martinez Hardware and Rose's Cafe, its faded sign barely visible through the grime that seemed to accumulate faster than he could clean it. The garage bay doors were rolled up, revealing the cramped interior, where 3 vehicles waited for his attention: a rusted pickup truck with transmission problems, an old sedan with a blown gasket, and Mrs. Peterson's ancient station wagon that made sounds no car should ever make. Sam ducked under the hood of the pickup truck, his weathered hands moving with practiced precision as he examined the transmission fluid. At 38, his face carried the lines of a man who'd seen too much disappointment. But his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that once made him one of the most sought-after automotive engineers in the Midwest. Those days felt like a lifetime ago, before his wife Sarah's illness, before the medical bills, before everything fell apart and left him rebuilding his life one oil change at a time. "Dad, you forgot to pack my lunch again." The voice belonged to Chloe, his 12-year-old daughter, who stood in the doorway connecting the garage to their small apartment above. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wore a summer dress that was getting too small for her growing frame. She held up an empty lunch bag with the patient expression of someone who'd learned to take care of details that adults sometimes missed. "Sorry, kiddo," Sam called out, not looking up from the engine. "There's sandwich stuff in the fridge. Make yourself whatever you want." Chloe disappeared back into the apartment, her footsteps echoing on the wooden stairs. Sam felt the familiar pang of guilt that accompanied most of their interactions these days. He was trying his best, but being both father and mother while running a struggling business left little time for the kind of attention a 12-year-old deserved. Sarah had been the organized one, the planner who remembered lunches and permission slips, and all the small details that made a house feel like a home. The bell above the shop door chimed, and Sam emerged from under the hood to see a man in an expensive suit examining the garage with obvious distaste. Vincent Stone was everything Sam wasn't: tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money. His silver hair was perfectly styled despite the heat, and his Italian leather shoes had probably cost more than Sam made in a month. "Are you the owner of this establishment?" Vincent asked, his voice carrying the clipped tones of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Sam Crawford, Sam replied, wiping his hands on his coveralls. "What can I do for you?" Vincent pulled out his phone and showed Sam a photograph of a sleek red sports car. "This is my Ferrari 458. It's been making an unusual noise, and my regular mechanic in Columbus is booked for the next 3 weeks. Someone at the country club mentioned you might be able to take a look." Sam studied the photo, his mind automatically cataloging potential issues. "What kind of noise? When does it happen? During acceleration, braking, turning, a grinding sound?" "When I shift into third gear," Vincent said, but his attention had already wandered to the cluttered workbench, an oil-stained floor. "Though I'm beginning to doubt whether this place has the proper equipment to work on a vehicle of that caliber." The dismissive tone hit Sam like a slap. He'd heard it countless times over the past few years. The assumption that because his shop was small and shabby, he couldn't possibly understand sophisticated machinery. People saw the surface and made judgments, never bothering to look deeper. "I've worked on Ferraris before," Sam said quietly. "Probably more than your regular mechanic." Vincent's eyebrows rose skeptically. "Really? And where was that?" "At another garage, like this one." Sam's jaw tightened. He could have mentioned his years designing engines for racing teams, his engineering, degree from Ohio State, the patents he still held on transmission improvements that were used in high-end sports cars around the world. Instead, he simply said, "I know my way around Italian engines." "I find that difficult to believe," Vincent said, his voice taking on a mocking edge. "No offense, but this place looks like it specializes in rust buckets and farm equipment. A Ferrari requires a certain level of expertise and precision that—" "That what?" Sam interrupted, his patience finally wearing thin. "That someone like me couldn't possibly have?" Vincent shrugged as if the answer was obvious. "Look around you, Crawford. This isn't exactly the kind of operation that inspires confidence when dealing with a $200,000 automobile." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with assumptions and prejudice. Sam felt his hands clench into fists, but before he could respond, Chloe appeared in the doorway again, this time carrying her packed lunch and school backpack. "Dad, I'm walking to summer camp," she announced. "Mrs. Rodriguez said she'd give me a ride home if you're still working late." Sam's anger deflated slightly as he looked at his daughter. She was growing up too fast, becoming too independent because he couldn't always be there when she needed him. The bills kept piling up. The business barely broke even most months. And now this pompous, rich man was standing in his garage, acting like Sam was some kind of incompetent fool. "Have a good day, sweetheart," Sam said, forcing a smile. "I'll try to be done by dinner." Chloe kissed his cheek and headed out the front door, leaving Sam alone with Vincent Stone and the weight of his own frustration. Vincent watched the girl leave with the detached interest of someone observing a mildly curious phenomenon. "Single father?" Vincent asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "That's right." "Must be challenging trying to raise a child while running a business like this, especially when the business doesn't seem to be thriving." Sam's temper flared again. "My personal life is none of your concern. You want your Ferrari looked at or not?" Vincent smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Actually, I've changed my mind. I think I'll wait for my regular mechanic to have an opening, but I'll tell you what. I'm curious about something. You seem to think you're capable of working on sophisticated machinery. How confident are you in those abilities?" "Confident enough." "Confident enough to put your money where your mouth is." Sam studied Vincent's face, sensing a trap, but unable to see where it was leading. "What are you talking about?" Vincent walked over to the garage bay doors and looked out at Sycamore Lane, his gaze taking in the modest shops and working-class neighborhood. "I'm part of a racing enthusiast group that meets every month. We often make friendly wagers on various automotive challenges. Nothing serious, just a way to keep things interesting. And well, I was thinking about your claim that you understand sophisticated machinery. It got me wondering, if someone gave you a real challenge, how would you perform?" Sam's instinct screamed warning, but his pride was still stinging from Vincent's earlier comments. "What kind of challenge?" Vincent turned back to face him, his smile growing wider. "There's a junkyard about 10 miles outside town, Thunderbird Scrap, I believe it's called, full of cars that nobody wants. Vehicles that are beyond repair. What if someone were to go there, pick any car they wanted, and try to turn it into something capable of competing in a real race?" "That's impossible. Junkyard cars are usually stripped for parts or completely rusted out." "Exactly," Vincent said, his voice taking on the tone of someone explaining a joke to a slow child. "Which is why it would be such an interesting challenge. Of course, it would have to be a legitimate race, with real competitors and proper oversight. Nothing amateur." Sam felt his pulse quicken despite himself. "What kind of race?" "The Oakwood Racing Circuit hosts monthly amateur events. Nothing too serious, just local enthusiasts and weekend warriors. But the cars have to pass safety inspections, and the competition is real enough. The next event is in exactly 30 days. The pieces of Vincent's proposal began to fall into place, and Sam realized he was being maneuvered into something that could only end badly. "You're talking about taking a junkyard car and getting it ready to race in 30 days. I'm talking about putting your confidence to the test. You claim to understand sophisticated machinery. Prove it. Take any car from that junkyard and turn it into something that can compete at Oakwood. If you can do it, if you can actually finish the race without breaking down, I'll pay you $10,000. Sam's breath caught. $10,000 would solve most of his immediate problems. The overdue rent, the stack of bills on his kitchen table, maybe even enough left over to buy Chloe some new clothes for school. But 30 days to transform a junkyard wreck into a racing car? It sounded impossible. "And if I can't do it?" Vincent's smile turned predatory. "Then you admit that you're exactly what you appear to be, a small-town mechanic who's in over his head. No shame in that, Crawford. We all have limitations." The challenge, the wager, hung between them like a gauntlet thrown down on medieval ground. Sam knew he should walk away, should recognize the bet for what it was. A rich man's game designed to humiliate someone he saw as beneath him. But the money was real, and so was the implication that Sam wasn't capable of something extraordinary. $10,000 if I can get a junkyard car ready to race in 30 days. If you can get it ready and actually compete. The car has to pass inspection, complete at least half the race distance, and you have to drive it yourself. No help from professional teams, no expensive equipment you can't afford on your own. Sam thought about Chloe walking to summer camp because he couldn't afford to send her to the better programs across town. He thought about the stack of overdue notices that kept him awake at night and the way people like Vincent Stone looked at him like he was a failure who'd never amount to anything. "You're serious about this?" "Completely serious. Though I understand if you'd rather not take the risk. Like I said, we all have limitations." The words were carefully chosen, designed to sting and provoke. Sam recognized the manipulation but felt powerless to resist it. His pride, his desperation, and his deeply buried belief that he was capable of more than his current circumstances suggested all combined into a moment of reckless decision-making. "All right," Sam heard himself say. "You've got a bet." Vincent's grin was triumphant. "Excellent. I'll draw up the paperwork this afternoon and have it delivered tomorrow. The terms will be exactly as we discussed. 30 days, any car from Thunderbird's scrap, and you have to compete at Oakwood Racing Circuit. This should be very entertaining." He turned and walked toward the door, pausing only to add, "Oh, and Crawford, I hope you don't disappoint your daughter when this goes exactly the way we both know it will." The door chimed as Vincent left, and Sam stood alone in his garage, the magnitude of what he'd just agreed to settling over him like a heavy blanket. 30 days to accomplish the impossible, with $10,000 and his reputation on the line. He looked around at his modest shop, at the tools that were good but not great, at the evidence of a life that had shrunk to fit circumstances he'd never intended. For the first time in years, Sam Crawford felt something stirring inside him that had nothing to do with desperation, and everything to do with the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he was capable of something extraordinary after all. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So, if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The paperwork arrived the next morning with a courier who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else than standing in front of Crawford's auto repair. Sam signed for the thick manila envelope, noting the expensive letterhead and legal firm address stamped across the top. Vincent Stone wasn't taking any chances. This was a binding contract, complete with penalty clauses and specific performance requirements that made Sam's stomach twist as he read through them. Kyle Gonzalez arrived for work an hour later, his youthful energy a sharp contrast to Sam's brooding mood. At 22, Kyle had the kind of optimism that hadn't yet been worn down by repeated disappointments. He'd been working at the garage for 8 months, eager to learn and surprisingly talented with engines, though his formal training was limited to what he'd picked up at the community college. "Morning, boss," Kyle called out, grabbing his coveralls from the hook by the door. "You look like someone stole your coffee. Everything okay?" Sam folded the contract and shoved it into his back pocket. "We need to talk about something that's either going to save this business or destroy what's left of my reputation." Kyle's expression shifted from casual to concerned. "That sounds serious." "It is." Sam gestured toward the small office area where he kept his desk and filing cabinets. "Sit down. I need to tell you about something I did yesterday, and then I need your help deciding whether I've lost my mind." For the next 20 minutes, Sam explained the encounter with Vincent Stone, the humiliating assumptions, and the bet that now legally bound him to attempt the impossible. Kyle listened without interruption, his eyes growing wider as the full scope of the challenge became clear. 30 days, Kyle finally said. "Boss, that's crazy. I mean, I've seen you work miracles with engines that other mechanics gave up on, but a junkyard car to racing condition? That's not just crazy, it's impossible." "That's what I thought too. But the money, 10 grand, would solve a lot of problems." Kyle agreed. "But what happens if you can't do it? What's the penalty?" Sam pulled out the contract and pointed to a specific clause. "Public acknowledgement that I was wrong about my abilities. Vincent gets to publish the results in the local paper and racing magazines. Basically, he gets to humiliate me professionally." Kyle whistled low. He really wants to see you fail. The question is whether you're going to give him that satisfaction and whether I can ask you to help me with something this risky. Kyle was quiet for a long moment, staring at the contract. What kind of help are we talking about? I can't pay you extra. Business barely covers your regular salary as it is. But if we're going to do this, I need someone who knows engines and isn't afraid of hard work, someone willing to spend nights and weekends on a project that might not work. And if it does work, if we actually pull this off, Sam managed a small smile, then you get to say you helped build a race car from scratch. That's the kind of experience that looks good on a resume when you're ready to move on to bigger shops. Kyle stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Sycamore Lane, where the morning traffic was picking up. A school bus rumbled past, followed by pickup trucks heading to construction sites and factory workers driving cars that had seen better decades. This was Oakmont, honest, hard-working, and forgotten by the people who made decisions in boardrooms and country clubs. You know what really bugs me about this, Kyle said. It's not that the bet is impossible. It's that this Vincent Stone guy thinks he already knows everything about you based on what your shop looks like. He doesn't know about the racing engines you designed, or the fact that you can diagnose problems other mechanics miss, or that you rebuilt Mrs. Patterson's transmission with parts you machined yourself because the originals weren't available anymore. How do you know about the racing engines? Kyle turned back with a sheepish expression. I looked you up online after my first week here. Found some old articles from Racing Engineering magazine. Samuel Crawford, lead design engineer for Midwest Performance Systems. 3 patents on transmission improvements. Worked with some pretty famous racing teams before you moved back to Oakmont. Sam felt heat rising in his cheeks. That was a long time ago. Not that long, and designing engines is different from building cars, but the principles are the same. Plus, you've got something that fancy racing teams don't have. What's that? You've got nothing to lose and everything to prove. That's worth more than expensive equipment sometimes. Before Sam could respond, the front door chimed, and Lucia Fernandez entered, carrying a covered plate that smelled like heaven. The owner of the diner 3 doors down, Lucia had been bringing Sam lunch whenever she noticed he was too busy to eat, which was most days. She was 45, with silver streaking her dark hair and the kind of warm smile that made people feel instantly welcome. "Buenos dias, Sam, Kyle," she said. She set the plate on the counter and pulled back the foil to reveal a steaming breakfast burrito with eggs, bacon, and peppers. "You missed breakfast again? And Chloe stopped by this morning saying you forgot to eat yesterday, too." "That kid worries too much," Sam said, but he accepted the plate gratefully. "What do I owe you?" "Nothing. Consider it an investment in keeping you healthy enough to fix my delivery truck when it breaks down again." Lucia noticed the contract on the desk and the serious expressions on both men's faces. "Am I interrupting something important?" Kyle looked at Sam, who shrugged. If they were really going to attempt this project, word would get around Oakmont soon enough. Might as well start with someone they trusted. "Sam made a bet yesterday," Kyle said. "Tell her about Vincent Stone." As Sam recounted the story for the second time, Lucia's expression shifted from curiosity to indignation to something that looked like fierce determination. She knew the financial pressures Sam faced. She'd watched him struggle to balance fatherhood and business while maintaining his dignity in the face of mounting bills. This man, this Vincent Stone, she said when Sam finished. "He thinks he's better than you because he has money. He thinks he's better than all of us. People like him see places like Oakmont as quaint curiosities," Sam replied. "We're the supporting cast in their story. Then you show him he's wrong. You take his money and you make him eat his words." "It's not that simple, Lucia. 30 days to build a race car from junk. Even if it's possible, I don't have the resources for something like that." Lucia was quiet for a moment, then pulled out her phone and started scrolling through contacts. "My brother-in-law Rico works at the steel plant. He owes me a favor from when I catered his daughter's quinceañera. I bet he could help with metal work if you need it." "Lucia, I can't ask people to—" "You're not asking. I'm offering. And I'm not the only one in this town who's tired of being looked down on by people with more money than sense." She found the contact she was looking for and started dialing. "Rico, it's Lucia. I need to talk to you about helping a friend with a project." Kyle watched the conversation with growing excitement. "Boss, she's right. This isn't just about you anymore. This is about showing people like Vincent Stone that they don't know everything." Sam felt a mix of gratitude and terror as he realized what was happening. The bet he'd made in a moment of wounded pride was becoming something bigger, involving people who had their own reasons for wanting to see an underdog succeed. The pressure was mounting, but so was the support. And for the first time since signing the contract, Sam began to think that maybe, just maybe, this insane project might actually be possible. Lucia finished her call and turned back to them with a satisfied expression. "Rico will meet us at Thunderbird Scrap this afternoon. He says Chester Brooks has been saving some interesting pieces over the years, cars that might have good bones underneath the rust." "You know Chester Brooks?" "Honey, I know everyone in this county. Chester's been running that junkyard for 30 years. And he's got an eye for vehicles with potential. He's also got a soft spot for people who remind him of his younger self." Sam looked at the contract, then at Kyle's eager face, then at Lucia's determined expression. 3 people against impossible odds, with 30 days to prove that skill and heart could triumph over money and prejudice. It should have felt hopeless. Instead, for the first time in months, Sam Crawford felt something that might have been hope. "All right," he said, folding the contract and putting it away. "Let's go find ourselves a race car." The drive to Thunderbird Scrap took them through the outskirts of Oakmont, past farms where corn was growing tall in the summer heat, and abandoned factories that had once provided jobs for half the town. Kyle rode shotgun in Sam's pickup truck, while Lucia followed in her delivery van, all 3 of them nervous about what they might find. Thunderbird Scrap occupied 20 acres of rolling hills covered with automotive archaeology, decades of vehicles that had reached the end of their useful lives, arranged in rough rows according to make and year. Chester Brooks had owned the place since before Sam was born, accumulating a reputation as someone who could find any part for any car, given enough time and patience. Chester himself emerged from a small trailer that served as his office, wiping his hands on a rag that might have been white sometime in the distant past. At 70, he moved with the careful deliberation of someone whose joints protested every morning, but his eyes were sharp and curious as he watched the unlikely trio approach. "Lucia Fernandez," he called out in greeting, "what brings you out to my little corner of paradise? And with company, no less." "Chester Brooks. Meet Sam Crawford and Kyle Gonzalez. Sam's the mechanic I've been telling you about." The one who fixed my delivery truck when everyone else said it was hopeless. Chester studied Sam with the appraising look of someone who'd spent a lifetime evaluating both machines and the people who worked on them. "Crawford, I heard about you. Word is you know your way around an engine." "I try," Sam said. "Mr. Brooks, I need to ask you about something that might sound crazy." "Son, I've been in the salvage business for 30 years. Crazy is my specialty. What do you need?" Sam explained about the bet, the 30-day deadline, and the need to find a vehicle with enough potential to become competitive. Chester listened without comment, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. When Sam finished, the old man was quiet for a long moment. "Vincent Stone," Chester finally said. "I know that name. Rich fellow from the country club, drives fancy cars and looks at people like us like we're something stuck to his shoe. That's the one. And he thinks you can't turn one of my cars into a racer. He thinks it's impossible." Chester's weathered face split into a grin that revealed teeth stained by decades of coffee and tobacco. "Well then, Mr. Crawford, let's go prove him wrong. I've got something back here that might interest you." Chester Brooks led them through the maze of rusted vehicles like a tour guide in a museum of automotive history. Pickup trucks from the 70s sat next to compact cars from the 80s, their paint faded and chrome pitted by decades of weather. Kyle kept stopping to examine interesting engines, while Lucia picked her way carefully through the uneven ground, avoiding puddles left by the previous night's rain. "Most folks see junk when they look at this place," Chester said, gesturing toward a row of muscle cars that had seen better days. "But I see potential. Every one of these vehicles was somebody's pride and joy once. They all have stories, and some of them still have fight left in them." They walked deeper into the yard, past sections organized by decade and manufacturer. Sam found himself cataloging the vehicles automatically, his engineer's mind assessing chassis strength, engine accessibility, and potential for modification. Most of what he saw confirmed his worst fears. Rust had eaten through critical structural elements, engines were seized from years of exposure, and anything valuable had long since been stripped by other customers. "Now, this section here," Chester continued, stopping near a chain-link fence that separated a smaller area from the main yard. "This is my private collection. Cars I've been holding on to for special occasions or the right buyer." The gate was secured with a heavy padlock, but Chester produced a key ring that looked like it belonged in a medieval dungeon. Behind the fence sat perhaps 24 vehicles, and even at first glance, Sam could see these were different. The rust was surface level rather than structural. The bodies were mostly intact, and several still had their engines. "Is that one?" Kyle asked, pointing to a blue and white coupe that sat slightly apart from the others. Chester followed his gaze and smiled. 1972, Chevrolet Camaro, Z28. Previous owner was a young man who thought he could handle more power than he actually could. Wrapped it around a tree about 15 years ago. The front end took the impact, but the engine and transmission were mostly protected. Sam approached the Camaro with growing interest. The front bumper was crumpled, and the hood was badly dented, but the damage appeared to be confined to easily replaceable panels. The rear of the car was virtually untouched. And through the back window, he could see bucket seats that, while faded, were still intact. "What kind of engine?" Sam asked, running his hand along the damaged fender. 350 small block, 4-barrel carburetor. The transmission is a Muncie 4-speed manual." Kid had just finished rebuilding both before his unfortunate encounter with the oak tree. Lucia watched Sam circle the car like a predator, evaluating prey. Do you see something there? Maybe. The proportions are right for a racing car. Long hood, short deck, wide stance, and the Z28 package means it was built for performance from the factory. Sam knelt down and peered under the front end, noting that the frame rails appeared straight despite the cosmetic damage. "Mr. Brooks, would you mind if I took a closer look?" Chester produced another key and unlocked the Camaro's driver's door. The hinges protested with a squeal of metal on metal, but the door opened fully. The interior smelled of mildew and old leather, but the basic structure was sound. Sam slid behind the wheel and tested the pedals, checked the sight lines, and imagined what it would feel like to pilot this machine around a racetrack. "The engine turns over by hand," Chester offered. "I checked it myself last spring. Compression seems good, though it'll need a complete rebuild if you want reliability." Kyle had found his way under the hood and was examining the engine bay with the enthusiasm of someone half his age, discovering a new toy. "Boss, come look at this. The engine's definitely seized, but I can see the pistons through the carburetor intake. No obvious cracks in the block, and the headers look aftermarket. High-performance stuff." Sam joined Kyle under the hood, his excitement building as he assessed the mechanical possibilities. The engine bay was cramped, but well organized, with quality components that suggested the previous owner had known what he was doing before his skills exceeded his judgment. "What about the suspension?" Sam asked Chester. "Front end took some damage in the crash, but the rear suspension is mostly original. Heavy-duty springs and shocks, limited slip differential. Like I said, this was a serious performance car." Sam walked around to the back of the Camaro and knelt down to examine the rear axle and suspension components. The differential housing showed no signs of damage, and the rear springs appeared to have the kind of heavy-duty rating that would handle the stress of racing. Most importantly, the frame appeared to be straight, the kind of catastrophic structural damage that would make the project impossible was nowhere to be seen. "Mr. Brooks," Sam said, standing up and brushing dirt off his knees. "What would you want for this car?" Chester stroked his chin thoughtfully. "Well, that depends. You planning to restore it to original condition, or are you thinking about something more ambitious? Racing, full competition preparation?" "In that case," Chester continued, "I'd say we need to talk about more than just the car itself. You're going to need parts, lots of them, engine internals, suspension upgrades, safety equipment, the kind of specialized components that cost serious money at retail prices." Lucia stepped forward. "Chester, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that maybe it's time I got involved in something more interesting than selling water pumps and door handles. Sam, I've been collecting racing parts for 20 years. Previous customers who started projects they never finished, estate sales from old races, manufacturers' overstock that I bought cheap. I've got engine internals that would cost you thousands at Summit Racing, suspension components from cars that cost more than most people's houses." Sam felt his pulse quicken. "And you'd be willing to make me a deal? You take the Camaro and whatever parts you need from my collection. In exchange, when you win that race and collect your $10,000, you pay me half. If you don't win, you don't owe me anything except a good story about how we tried." Kyle looked like he might faint from excitement. "Boss, that's the deal of a lifetime. With real racing parts and Mr. Brooks's help, we might actually have a chance." Sam studied Chester's weathered face, looking for the catch that had to be hidden somewhere in such a generous offer. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." "Son, I've been watching rich folks look down on working people my whole life, and plenty of them come through here over the years buying parts for their weekend toy cars and acting like I should be grateful for their business. This Vincent Stone character sounds like he needs to learn that money can't buy everything, and skill and determination still count for something." Lucia clapped her hands together. "It's perfect. Sam gets his race car, Chester gets to stick it to another arrogant rich man, and Kyle gets the education of a lifetime." "There's one more thing," Chester said, his expression growing serious. "Building a race car isn't just about the mechanical work. You need someone who understands racing strategy, driving techniques, how to set up a car for different track conditions. I know someone who might be able to help with that part." "Who?" "Friend of mine named Frankie Walsh, goes by Motor. He's been around racing longer than any of us. Worked as a mechanic for some pretty famous drivers back in the day. Retired now, but he still knows more about making cars go fast than most people forget." Sam felt pieces falling into place with almost supernatural precision. The right car, the right parts, expert guidance. It was starting to feel less like an impossible dream and more like a legitimate project. "Where would I find this Frankie Walsh?" "He's usually at Murphy's Tavern most afternoons, holding court at the corner table and telling stories about the old days. I'll give him a call. Let him know you might be stopping. Bye." Kyle was practically bouncing with excitement. "Boss, this is really happening. We're actually going to build a race car." "We're going to try," Sam corrected, but he couldn't keep the smile off his face. "Mr. Brooks, if you're serious about this partnership, then I accept. But I want to be clear about something. This isn't just about the money anymore. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. That means safety equipment, proper preparation, and no shortcuts that could get someone hurt." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Chester agreed. "When do you want to get started?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll bring my tools and Kyle, and we'll assess exactly what we're working with." "How long do you think it will take to get the car moved to my shop?" "I can have Rico bring his flatbed truck this afternoon," Lucia offered. "He owes me that favor anyway, and this gives him a chance to see what kind of project he might be helping with." As they walked back toward the gate, Sam felt the familiar mixture of excitement and terror that accompanied any major decision. 24 hours ago, he'd been a struggling mechanic trying to make ends meet. Now, he was committed to a project that would consume the next month of his life and potentially determine his family's future. "Sam," Lucia said as they reached their vehicles, "I need to ask you something. Are you doing this for the money, or are you doing this to prove Vincent Stone wrong?" The question caught him off guard, forcing him to examine motivations he hadn't fully acknowledged. "I started it for the money. Chloe needs things I can't afford, and $10,000 would solve a lot of problems. And now," Sam looked back at the Camaro, barely visible through the fence, but already transformed in his mind from a damaged relic into a potential racing machine. "Now it's about proving that being underestimated doesn't mean being defeated. Vincent Stone looked at me and saw exactly what he expected to see, a small-town mechanic who didn't matter. I want to show him how wrong he was." Kyle nodded enthusiastically. "Plus, boss, think about what this means for the shop. If we pull this off, if we actually build a competitive race car from scratch, Word is going to get around. People are going to know that Crawford's auto repair is capable of serious work. That's assuming we don't fail spectacularly and become the laughingstock of Central Ohio, Sam replied, but his tone was lighter than his words suggested. Chester locked the gate behind them and pocketed his keys. Son, I've been in the automotive business for 50 years. I've seen a lot of people attempt a lot of impossible things. Most of them fail because they're trying to prove something to someone else. The ones who succeed are usually trying to prove something to themselves. As they drove back toward Oakmont, Sam reflected on Chester's words. Maybe the old man was right. Maybe this project had less to do with Vincent Stone and more to do with rediscovering the part of himself that had once designed engines for racing teams and believed that engineering skill could overcome any obstacle. Either way, in less than 30 days, he was going to find out exactly what Sam Crawford was capable of accomplishing when everything was on the line. The Camaro arrived at Crawford's auto repair on Rico's flatbed at 6 a.m., looking even worse in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the garage than it had in the forgiving shadows of the junkyard. Rico Fernandez turned out to be a compact, muscular man with calloused hands and the kind of steady demeanor that came from 20 years of working with molten steel. He and Kyle managed to winch the car off the truck and position it in the center bay, where it sat like a wounded animal waiting for surgery. "Dios mío," Rico muttered, walking around the damaged front end. "My sister-in-law didn't mention you were trying to resurrect the dead." Sam ran his hand along the crumpled hood, already visualizing the work ahead. "The damage looks worse than it is. Most of this is cosmetic sheet metal that can be replaced or straightened. The important parts are protected underneath. If